let's talk about something that's a little bit controversial and a little bit polarizing in the RPG industry. And that is DMPCs. DMPC just stands for Dungeon Master Player Character. And if you Google this or if you look on YouTube, just type in DMPC, almost everything is like, don't do this. DMPCs are dumb. This is terrible. Well, I'm here to say the exact opposite of all of those things because I'm actually a huge fan of DMPCs. If you're running a Ptolus campaign, they can be incredibly useful, and honestly, even if you're not, they're still a very, very useful tool. First, let me tell you, the very first DMPC I ran was simply because the calling campaign started out as just Vocath. I had one player with one character. And so the first DMPC that I had in that campaign was Talon Ursulado. Again, if you've read the Ptolus book and you've looked at the Ghostly Minstrel, his name is Terran Ursulado. I spelled it wrong, and so his name ever since then has been Talon. It started out as just a DMPC, and with that, what we did was actually the player who ran Vo ran Talon part of the time, and then I ran Talon part of the time. This is one of my favorite ways to run a DMPC. Obviously, there's all the different things that tell you, don't do this, this is bad, whatever. And those are all true, right? You don't want your DMPC to show up your player characters. You don't want your DMPC to be the one that's solving all the problems and doing all the cool things. You don't want your DMPC to steal the spotlight, right? They are there kind of like an NPC in a supporting role, in a additional person capacity. When you're running duet D&D campaigns, like what I was doing when we started out with my very first Ptolus campaign, it's also really, really helpful to have that extra character in there. And even if you're running in a large group, having that extra person where you can disseminate information and also have some extra hitting power when necessary is incredibly useful. I've now done this several times, and I'm getting ready to add another one in the calling campaign where I'm going to have one of these shared. I don't know if we should probably come up with a different name, like an SDMPC, like shared DMPC, DMSPC. I don't know. Argue about that in the comments or over on our Ptolus specific Discord. But it has come in incredibly handy for me because what we did was we shared the playing of this person, and what that allowed me to do is have somebody in the group that can give information that the PCs don't necessarily have. If you're playing a Ptolus campaign or some other campaign where you need to know people or where it would make sense that the player characters would know something, or maybe even they're new to the area, whatever they're doing, that DMPC can pipe up and simply say, hey, I already know a person that does that, let's go over here. If they're new to the area, the DMPC can say, hey, I know where that is, follow me and I'll take you there. Now, again, you're probably thinking, what's the difference between that DMPC and an NPC? Typically an NPC kind of pops in and out, whereas that DMPC mostly sticks along with the party. They adventure with the party, they share in the loot, they share in the experience points, and they kind of level up with the party most of the time. It's a closer connection, it's a closer relationship with the PCs than the tavern person that you talk to from time to time, or the random guy on the road, or even one of the patrons that might be sponsoring your group or sending information to your group from time to time. This DMPC is normally in the thick of it, in the fray. Other things to avoid that are on that list of don't ever do DMPCs are things like your player characters might start to think that, oh, well, the DM isn't going to kill their own PC, so we'll send that guy in first as the residual 10-foot pole for the group. My son actually tried to do this. He's young, obviously, but I had a DMPC in our campaign because there's 3 of us in there, my son, my daughter, and then I had the DMPC so that I could flesh out that group a little bit more. He made the mistake of saying, oh, well, Dad won't kill his DMPC, so I'm going to send him in first. What did I do to absolve him of that concept? The DMPC walked into the room and boom, we knocked him unconscious with a whole lot of damage right out of the gate. And so that disabused him of the notion that I won't ever hurt the DMPC. Same thing here, that it's okay to put them at risk. It's even okay to kill them. And that's another potentially good way that you could kill off characters, showing the level of threat, the level of danger to your party without necessarily killing an actual PC and then upsetting a character. Another great use for the DMPC, if you are running a live game, is if somebody's character does die in the setting, then maybe they're not completely dead. They're only mostly dead, right? Old movie reference there. But you could then turn over the running of the DMPC to the person at the table until you drag the lifeless husk of the PC back and get it resurrected. Or if that person is totally dead, then they could run the DMPC for a little while moving forward until they create a new character, whatever the case may be. Again, in the Ugly Ink campaign, what I've got is one of the characters actually has a follower, right? They have somebody that's underneath them. And so then I am going to share the running of that character with the primary player that's running the leader, right? And so what we're going to do with that is it, again, gives me an ability that I can give information to the player, and then the player can share that back and forth and know that it makes it a little bit more realistic. That not just an NPC is feeding the information, but it's something that's connected with the actual PC. They have a relationship. There's a consistent ongoing basis that they're in the game. I have run just a straight up DMPC, and that was Beli Ekik, also in the Pathfinder campaign of my very first Ptolus calling campaign. And he was just straight up a person that I started playing as a player character in somebody else's campaign. I brought him over because even with Vo and Talon, they needed a rogue. That was my Beli character. I got to bring him in. And again, personally, I find that having a DMPC in the campaign itself also kind of ties me to it a little bit better. Obviously, I'm very invested in running my own game, right? You are as well. But for some reason, I have just always really enjoyed having my own person tracking along with the party as opposed to me just being this overarching narrator figure. It gives me both perspectives, and I get to give them information, I get to be involved, but at the same time, I also make sure that the DMPC is not omniscient. That's another great thing to say. If you're going to play one, that's one of the people complain and they're like, oh, well, they're just going to take it at face value. They're just going to take all the information from the DMPC. If they get stumped on something, they turn to the DMPC and they just assume the DM is going to give them the answer. Well, one of the things that I did was I have often had my DMPCs give incorrect information and guess just flat out wrong about stuff. And it reminded the players that DMPC is not the DM. They are just a person in the campaign that have a lot of the same information that they do, and therefore they're going to have to make those guesses. At the same time, if you ever do need to simply solve that riddle, give them the answer to the problem, it's not such a bad thing that the DMPC is able to put that in and they're right there with them, right? They're trustworthy most of the time and they know that they're going to get the information. But if you just seed in some of that doubt from time to time, reminding them that this is not you, this is not the narrator, this is not an all-knowing individual that can see everything that the narrator can, but instead they're just another person. So I want to decry the idea that running a DMPC is dumb, that you should never do it, etc., etc. I have really enjoyed this. It has been something I've done in basically every campaign that I've ever run. So maybe that means I'm bad at being a DM. I don't know. But I've always enjoyed it. And so if it's something you've never tried before, maybe you're not interested in it, or maybe you are and you believed all the videos and articles that said this is dumb, don't ever do this. I think if you avoid those pitfalls that I've talked about, right? If you avoid the pitfalls that all of those other videos say of why it's dumb, then it can be really, really useful. Like I said, especially in Ptolus, it has been great for me to have a DMPC in the group where I can give them that information. They can say, oh, I know a person that can handle that, or hey, I know a fence, whatever the case may be, because then that DMPC, they trust the person, they know that they probably know what they're talking about, they're from the area, whatever. It's allowed me to disseminate information through a realistic point versus them walking up to a random NPC and asking information, which isn't a bad thing either, obviously, but it's just been something that I really enjoyed. So I wanted to speak out against the DMPC hate. If anybody has a count for how many times I've said DMPC, I'm pretty sure I'm near 50 at this point, which is kind of ridiculous for one video. Regardless, I've really enjoyed them. I encourage you to give it a shot, especially if you're running a small group. If you're running a duet campaign, just you and one player, great way to include somebody. If you've got a group of 5, 6, 7 players, then you probably don't need this, but it can be kind of fun to drop yourself in there. It's also another challenge to give yourself to see if it does the same thing for you that it's done for me, and that's connected me both at the narrator level, but then also at that kind of street level to be thinking, how would my players be looking at this? What would my character be thinking about this, even though I'm in there? And then the other thing is to try that shared control of this character. It's been really, really useful for us. I think we've done this 3 times now since we started running this campaign in 2017. And it's been really useful where they get to run that person from time to time. If they're in combat, they probably run them. Even if they're in some other social situations, they're able to then say what that person's going to say, control their actions, whatever they're thinking. And only a handful of times have I ever said, like, no, they're not going to do that, or done kind of a DM fiat takeaway. Nope, that's not the way it's going to work, whatever. I've very, very seldom had to do that. Another great thing when it comes to these, if you're going to try one, is if you're running a play-by-post campaign. If you've never heard of play-by-post, I am going to work on a video to talk about doing a hybrid approach, because I think play-by-post should be included in every live-action campaign, because it's just a way that you can do some awesome stuff that just doesn't really work around a table when there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other people looking at you, and you're just talking about this one little interaction with one NPC that only affects your character. That makes the world so much more realistic. The famous V word, verisimilitude, or verisimilitude, however you pronounce that. And I just really, really love play-by-post. It's the only way I'm playing currently, and so I recommend this. But again, for that DMPC, in a play-by-post campaign, it's flawless, because just reading between those two, if the player can post as that person, and so can you, then a lot of times the other players don't even know which one of you is saying those things. So again, this is a really great way to try this out. And if you haven't, give it a shot. If you don't like it, just kill him. No big deal. If you've run a DMPC, please comment down below and let me know what you think of it. If you've done it well, done it poorly, liked it, disliked it, I'd love to know what your feedback is on that. And then also, if you're going to give it a shot, let us know that as well. I'm curious what you guys might be trying to do. If you've never done this before, never thought about doing it before, let us know in the comments down below. This is a pretty off-the-cuff video for me. Didn't write a script. It just bugged me that I saw somebody saying so many times about how DMPCs are terrible and awful, and so I just wanted to share a little bit of my experience with this, because I really enjoyed DMPCs, and I really think that they could add some flavor, some richness to your game. And if you've never heard of play-by-post before, then check out my old video. The audio is not so great. I apologize. I might make another one someday. Check out my old video talking about play-by-post. And again, ding the tolling bell, subscribe, all the crap everybody on YouTube tells you to do. Check that out. And then you'll get to see some more of my videos in the future. Until next time, stay out of the shadow of the Spire.